Well, good morning. Hope your Sunday is off to a good start. Since we last met, the calendar has turned to June, the month when summer arrives. At least we hope it arrives. This is also the month when the Michigan legislature must wrap up a lot of its business before taking off for much of the summer. This morning we'll get an update on where they stand, and it starts right now.
From TV6, this is The Ryan Report. Here's your host, Don Ryan.
State Representative Scott Dianda is in the final year of his third three-year term representing the 110th District, which includes most of the western Upper Peninsula. Dianda is term limited as a state representative, but has announced that he will be running for the state Senate from the 38th District. But there are still many issues pending in the House, and this morning we'll talk about that. Representative Dianda, welcome back to the Ryan Report.
Thank you, Don. Good to be here.
Nice to see you again. Has spring arrived in the Copper Country?
It has. We finally got the snow that is gone, so we're happy about that. It's nice to see green grass popping up all over.
And I know you're busy doing your housework, and not housework, but work for the House.
That's right.
And also now running for the Senate. Are you finding some time to enjoy the
Well, I tell you what, I'm getting to enjoy all the 12 counties in the 38th Senate District, and I got a chance to go around and see a lot of interesting sights the last couple of weeks.
Okay. I want to talk about school safety. You know, TV6 has kind of made a special area that we're concerned about, and so I want to present the same question to you I presented to the governor, and when he was here a few weeks ago, and the question was, you know, back when 9/11 occurred, this country spent billions of dollars to make air travel safe. Are we giving enough priority to the school safety issue?
I think that we need to do more priority with school safety, and it starts with the funding levels per pupil. We're about $2,000 per pupil short on what it takes to run an efficient public school. And to be able to put the money into the per pupil funding, we would be able to do a lot more in Michigan with being able to secure the doors, to hire the counselors, to provide that extra mental health that those young people need. And I think that's where we're falling short. And we're not going to be able to do it by just thinking that we're going to have a grant and we're going to have 50, 60 million that you're going to have to apply for as a local school. It has to be done by changing the per pupil funding. And I think the biggest thing that we can do to make it safe is to make sure every school is locking the front door. I think that's where it starts, number one, and identifying these young people that are having mental health issues. And I think that we got to have a big discussion across all of our state with the parents and the guardians. We cannot have these young people playing these murderous video games and having this type of lifestyle. We got to have that discussion with all of our friends, family, and everyone in this state of Michigan.
I know you've attended with Representative Cambenzi and perhaps others some town meetings on the subject. Have you learned anything new through that process?
Yes, I'll tell you what I have really learned is that these young people can be bullied 24/7 all the time. The electronic devices today is a lot different than when I was growing up. You know, when I was growing up in the 70s and 80s and going to school, you know, you might have got picked on, but you were at school, but when you get home, it was a safe haven. Now today, with the internet, electronic devices, and the texting, a lot of these children never get away from these bullies. And I think that that's a big part of it today, is that they're so connected all the time. There's no downtime for them, and there's not a safe haven a lot of times.
On the subject of making the schools themselves more secure, often it's much more than just putting locks on the front door. I think there were a couple examples in Marquette where they had to completely redesign the entrance. Schools, you know, were originally designed as kind of friendly places where you can get halfway in the school before you even see an office.
That's correct.
We're talking a lot of money
We're talking a lot of money to change a lot of these older school systems. You know, one of the oldest ones that I have in my district right now is Calumet High School. It's in 1919 building, but they accommodated that setting on how the flow of the traffic comes in the buildings. And I think that's the biggest thing that we can do, is to make sure that right now all the doors are locked and there's one single point. That was the recommendation from the state police when we got a chance to sit down with them and when they attended the meetings. We have to make sure that the front door is locked, and we got to make sure that somebody is there. And I think that we can do it without spending a lot of money. Even right now, if there's schools that need to be secure, the front door has to be locked and they can put up an electronic lock with a temporary type camera to have it wired wherever to be able to buzz people in throughout the day. But when the bulk of the children are coming into that school, that's when those doors should be open and there should be somebody there. I think that's the biggest thing that we got to look at.
Do you think this OK to Say program is a good start?
I think it's a good start. I think that, you know, we got to have people that will be engaged in this, and the first thing is to be able to report this to the authorities. And I think that we're going to get more comfortable with folks to be able to use that system.
I did hear a report from State Police Captain Helpin. I think you heard the same report.
Yes.
That there are a lot of tips going to these lines, and many of them do turn out to be serious.
There are credible threats that come through, and that's why it's in our backyard across all of Michigan. It's just not in one spot. It's not in the city areas. It could be anywhere. Every threat has to be taken very credible, and we got to find out what the problem is and identify it. We never want to see anything happen like happened in Texas a couple weeks ago.
Would it be fair to say that we really do, and I think the governor has suggested this, need a complete report, collaborative effort between many different, parents, students, administrators? Everybody has to get involved to come to the right solution.
I do think that that's appropriate, but we do have to take the recommendation from our local law enforcement and the state police to be able to start with those folks who know how to protect folks. And I think that they're a big part to be able to say, make sure the front door is secure, make sure these are the signs that we're looking for, and get those counselors back in the school. We can't have one counselor for every 750 students on average in Michigan. We got to get back to the point where these counselors are seeing these younger people every 2-3 months, and the part of the process is to identify their problems that they're having with mental health, just problems in general, and to be able to get them engaged on what they want to do in the future. You know, this is the big part of it today. A lot of the people I talk to who are just starting to graduate, they don't know what they want to do yet. Right. That's terrible. I think that we got to go back to the days of having a counselor in there that's going to be talking about what's your future, what do you want to do, and identify these younger people at a younger age and put them on the right path. Okay. That's part of it.
Other questions on other subjects in just a couple of minutes. Back with more on the Ryan Report after we take this break. Our guest this morning is State Representative Scott Dianda. Let's talk about budgeting now. The state actually passed a budget for the coming fiscal year, but that's up in the air a little bit again. You voted against that budget. What were your concerns?
Well, my concerns, Don, is number one is the revenue sharing. The money in the state budget, we're not appropriating enough money into the locals, and we can see it everywhere we go. Every meeting that I attend on a local level, on the cities and the villages and the counties, it's the revenue sharing. We lost $5.5 billion since 1988. I was also the village president of Calumet back in 1992, and I'll tell you what, we had more budget back then of $700,000. Right now they're down to about $600,000. So every year we're seeing that, there's a decrease in revenue sharing and our expenses keep going up. So I'm committed to making sure that we get to the point in the next cycle that we start figuring out and funding the local units of government.
I think many people are aware of this, but why don't things seem to happen? What's the roadblock?
Well, the roadblock has been the last 8 years. I mean, the governor has more of a priority, in my opinion, to fund a lot of these state agencies and making sure that they have more than the locals do. And that's the problem that we're seeing across all 83 counties. The locals can't fix their roads, their sidewalks, they need infrastructure improvement, they just need basic maintenance. When you start looking at the potholes across Michigan and our roads, and you see 2-3 weeks at a time the same holes there, they don't have the money to be able to patch that hole. We got to get to the point where the money comes to the locals. And if we don't do that, we're going to continue to see this infrastructure fall apart. And I always truly believe the locals can spend the dollars a lot more wisely than we can in Lansing.
The budget is actually passed, but now the budget is usually based on revenue they feel is available.
Right.
They've since decided that there is a budget surplus, or there will be for the coming year. And just recently they announced that pretty much Republican leaders have announced that they want to spend $400 million more on infrastructure, $115 million for the rainy day fund, $58 million to help schools, $100 million for the governor's workforce development program. Do you agree with those proposals?
Well, I tell you what, in principle, we look at a funding source that we're having a projection on. So how much for long term is this going to be able to do? And I think that we got to come up with something that's going to be better. We got $57 billion, we got $10 billion worth of discretionary funding. We got to start looking at long-term solutions and not putting Band-Aids on this infrastructure. We've got $15 billion sitting in the school aid fund. That money should be put into our systems right now for our public schools. That's why we wouldn't have such a burden right now on the local units to be able to have what they need, whether it's security for the schools, whether it's going to be infrastructure improvements for the local units of government. That's what we got to come back to. Because my fear is that if this $400 million is here this time, what's it going to be next time? Are we going to see that that money's not there and a lot of people are starting to count on those dollars? We got to have long-term solutions to fix these problems in Michigan.
You have a major university in your district. There are several in the UP
Yes.
and community colleges. Are we doing enough to fund higher education?
I think that we're not taking a look at where we're going as a state with our economy. And if we're going to focus on the autonomous vehicles, we got to make sure that we're putting more money into higher ed to make sure that, like Michigan Tech, has the money that they need to train these engineers of the future on it. And I think that we're not really looking and focused on those things. The biggest thing for us to move Michigan forward is to have those emergent industries that are coming in, and we got to get a hold of those folks. We got to attract them to Michigan, and I don't think that we're doing enough right now because they don't have the dollars. Michigan Tech is right now waiting for an appropriation for a new STEM building in Michigan Tech's campus, and we're trying to get that done because that's another thing that's going to attract more of those students to Michigan Tech and more people that are going to come to Michigan. And looking at that all, it's going to add to the economy, not just in the UP, across the state when these people graduate and stay in the business of the autonomous vehicles, especially with the testing and everything we're going to have to do in Michigan.
When we talk about all of these budget issues, is there adequate revenue or do we need tax increases?
I don't think we need tax increases, Don. I really don't. I mean, I truly believe at $57 billion, there's plenty of money. Our population in Michigan is about 9.5 million, and when you look at the state of Georgia, they have the same amount of population, and they're running their state on about 33 billion. So I think there's adequate enough money to be able to do what we want to do with it, but we got to start looking at the priorities. And if we look at the state constitution, there's 3 things that we have to fund by statute. We have to take care of the roads, the schools, and the prisons. Everything else is second, and I think that we got to start prioritizing on that because we're going to be able to create the economy of the future by educating these kids in the state of Michigan. We have to prioritize and get to a system like we have in a lot of other parts of the world where we're identifying children at a younger age, getting them into where they want to be in life and specialize. We're going to be able to attract more business and also to fix the infrastructure. Got to be done. To attract these companies in Michigan, we have to get that infrastructure up and running.
Okay. We'll talk about some other issues in
Sure.
just a couple of minutes. I'll be back with more on the Ryan Report just 2 minutes from now. Again, our guest this morning is State Representative Scott Dianda. There was some good news earlier this year when the Cleveland Cliffs announced that they were considering the possibility of reopening the Empire Mine. I know you've been staying in touch with that issue. Do you think we have a possibility, and is the state doing all it can to support that?
I think we got a great time to be able to attract them here. We have been doing everything we can to find incentives through the MEDC for them. We're trying to make sure that they feel very welcome and that capital will feel welcome being back here. I think that we got a great opportunity to put a lot more people to work, and we fully support Cleveland Cliffs and their ability to open up the second mine. That is something that is just our lifeblood. It's part of our history, and it just goes hand in hand for what I talked about before with the autonomous vehicles. I mean, when you start to look at all the minerals that we have up here to be able to look into the future for these products, nothing's more than right in front of us than the iron ore.
Some legislation has now passed both the House and Senate, I believe, that would change some of the rules regarding the DEQ and their opportunity to decide on permits and various things. You voted against that legislation?
Yes, I'll tell you why. I was really concerned with being able to put a panel together that may just have a lot of industry folks on it. You know, and just recently we had about 20 different wells down in the Escanaba area that were poisoned with E. coli because of they don't know where some of this stuff is coming from. So, you know, I always want to be on the side of caution about having things in place to have the DEQ do their job. And I think that a lot of times this comes down to the issue with legislation that a lot of people want to put in to be able to do more than the policies that are in place. You know, I worked for state government for 10 years, and a lot of times I think that we have an executive that has to manage a lot of these agencies, and a lot of times it's better to be able to get them doing the right thing than trying to implement more laws and regulatory issue on it.
Also on the environmental side, the Enbridge Line 5 has become certainly an issue for many people. It does provide a valuable service for the Upper Peninsula, but on the other hand, I think many people are concerned about its potential impact on the Straits of Mackinac. Where do you stand on that issue?
Well, we're very much concerned to make sure that that line has the integrity. And if there is any type of problem with that line, we need to create a new line and put in a new system. And if that involves doing a tunnel system, to be able to make sure that we have reasonable and affordable propane across northern lower Michigan and the Upper Peninsula, we have to do whatever we have to do to make sure that that flows. Because we cannot afford to shut down any type of distribution where people are going to suffer, and especially up here. I do never want to go through what I did in my first term having propane that was almost $6 a gallon. Our folks up here cannot afford that type of product cost, and the small businesses can't either. So I think that, you know, we got to make sure whatever happens that it's secure, we protect the Great Lakes, but also we got to make sure that we have a distribution system where people they're going to get their propane done.
And just recently, the governor announced plans to limit the amount of anchoring in the Straits of Mackinac. Good decision?
Very good decision. We're very glad that he did that because we don't want to see anything happen to the electrical lines or the Pipeline 5.
Less than a minute. What about auto insurance reform?
Well, auto insurance reform, I have a bill that's a part of an 18 bill package, and we are asking Representative Lana Theis, who is the chairwoman in Lower Michigan, to take up those bills. It's a bipartisan package that would give us the option to pick what type of insurance we want, and that has to be done. And I always encourage everybody to reach out to her because she's controlling that right now. She wouldn't take that package up for a vote. Representative Pete Lucido is the lead on it, and Representative Pete Lucido is from Macomb County. He's a good friend of mine, Republican, and he also is a lawyer, and his family's in the insurance business. So we really want to vet those bills.
Do you think the program that's in place should be maintained?
I think that people should have the option, and if you have younger people in your back seat and you're looking in the rearview mirror and you got kids in baby seats back there, I think you should have the option to be able to insure what they're going to need if there's an accident. But if you're a single person, you should be able to pick what you want to do.
We'll have you back closer to the election, but any thoughts on your campaign at this point?
Working hard all over the UP, and really enjoying seeing everybody out there in the 12 counties.
Okay, well, thanks for coming in this
Thanks,
morning
Don.
and talking with us.
Thank you very much.
I'll be back with some other thoughts for you about state government in just a couple of minutes. You know, I learned something new about state government recently. To make it work, Michigan not only has countless agencies and departments, it also has a lot of boards and commissions. This discovery came about one day while I was surfing the internet looking for something, I don't recall what it was, when I stumbled on the fact that Michigan has an Apple Committee. And I thought, an Apple Committee. It's hard to believe a big state like ours, a state known as the auto capital of the world, has an Apple Committee. So, being one with a curious mind, it set me to thinking, if we have an Apple Committee, I wonder what other committees or boards we might have. Well, it turns out we have committees, boards, and commissions for almost everything. In all, there are more than 200. A few of the categories include education, dentistry, healthcare, veterans, barbers, trails, arts and culture, and a whole lot more. Some we're very familiar with, and they have major responsibilities like the Natural Resources Commission, the Mackinac Bridge Authority, or the Iron Industry Museum Board. Some you really have to wonder about. You probably didn't know this, but we have a Commission for Logistics and Supply Chain Collaboration. It's most likely very important, although I must admit I don't really know what that means. It certainly doesn't sound like a fun group. But let's get back to the Apple Committee. According to the state, it's dedicated to improving the profitability of Michigan's fresh and processed apple industries. Sounds like a worthy goal. And just in case you think we've given some unfair advantage to the apple among the fruits and vegetables grown in this state, you probably will be pleased to learn that we have an asparagus advisory board, a carrot commission, and a cherry committee. I know agriculture is serious business in Michigan, but it just makes me smile inside when I think of the meeting of the Carrot Commission. For some reason, I picture a group of people sitting around a table wearing T-shirts with a carrot emblazoned across the front. But it doesn't end there. Michigan also has a bean commission, a corn marketing program committee, a blueberry commission, a potato industry commission, and even an onion committee. I should point out that the Potato Industry Commission does have one member from the Upper Peninsula, and that the members of these committees are all citizens appointed by the governor, and most of them serve without compensation. So there you go. Through this exercise, I learned a little more about government in our state. I'm guessing that most of you this was news as well. So the next time you eat an apple, remember, in Michigan, we have a committee for that. I'll be back in a minute. We've run out of time for another week. The Today Show is just about ready to roll. Remember, for news anytime, check out uppermichigansource.com. You can also find a rebroadcast of this show at that same internet address. Thanks to Representative Dianda for joining us this morning to talk about some of the key decisions that still must be made in Lansing. And thank you for tuning in. Let's plan to get together at this same spot next Sunday morning.